It's a bright new day, the beginning of a bright new week of possibilities where ideas are exchanged and value gets transmitted from one part to the other. This is Early Exchange from Souk News, Lagos, Nigeria. My name is Ayo Jimmy. Welcome on board this week. And I have beside me Ola Oluwawe. Ola, good morning. I like your look this morning.
Yes, good morning. How are you?
I'm very fine.
How do you feel having me around today?
No, well, it's good to have a new face beside me. It's still part of the crew, and we're good together.
Yes, shout out to Blessing H.A. who will now be joining us from the newsstand. But then today is a power-packed show, I must say. We're talking about wildlife conservation from the angle of business practices. We're also going to be talking about mergers and acquisitions. Also, we're talking about sustainable investing. How can you ensure that you invest right? Lined up for our conversations today is also venture capital and startups. So stay tuned for the show today. Before we go any further, let's get to the morning news update studio with Blessing H.A. and have the updates. Good morning, Blessing.
Good morning, Ola. Good morning, Ayer. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the morning news update. It's a new week, so let's get you updated on new development. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying tuned to the morning news. I am Blessing H. Now let's begin with the development in Nigeria with the rollout of compressed natural gas (CNG) by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited (NNPCL) will kickstart by the first quarter of 2024, according to the Group Chief Executive Officer Mele Kyari. This decision comes after an agreement between the company and NIPCO PLC to develop CNG infrastructure and provide an alternative fuel option for vehicles, following the removal of fuel subsidies. The CNG rollout will occur in phases, with the first phase comprising 21 CNG stations supporting intra-city transportation, expected to be operational by early 2024. The second phase, consisting of 35 CNG stations for intercity transportation, is also set to be ready in 2024. While NIPCO Gas has already converted over 7,000 vehicles to run on CNG and operates 14 CNG stations in Nigeria, NNPC retail stations will also deploy an extra 56 CNG stations across the country. The World Bank has announced its intention to collaborate with the Nigerian government and private sector to support the construction of 1,000 mini solar power grids in Nigeria, the largest economy in Africa. World Bank President A.J. Banga revealed this initiative on Saturday. Nigeria, with its population exceeding 200 million, faces a power shortage despite having a power generation capacity of 12,500 megawatts. Mini grids, comprising small-scale electricity generation units, are expected to address this issue by providing electricity to communities that lack access. Currently, around 150 mini grids have been established with partial funding from the World Bank to extend power to underserved areas. The Nigerian Railway Corporation (NRC) has warned passengers traveling on the Lagos-Ibadan train route about the activities of cyber criminals who are selling fake train tickets online to scam them. The corporation advised passengers not to fall for these fraudulent claims and emphasized that online ticket sales for the Lagos-Ibadan route are not yet being conducted by NRC. Excuse me. The managing director of NRC, Mr. Fide Tokiria, urged passengers to only obtain their train boarding tickets from the designated railway stations. This cautionary message was conveyed in a statement issued by Mr. Tokiria on August 6, 2023 in Lagos. The Lagos Police Command has arrested 3 individuals in connection with the death of Dr. Wari Diasco at the General Hospital in Lagos. The spokesperson for the command, SP Benjamin Hundeyi, confirmed the arrest and stated that the police are conducting an investigation into the case. The incident occurred due to a faulty elevator at the General Hospital Odon, Lagos, resulting in the unfortunate death of Dr. Wari Diasco, a medical doctor working at the facility. Still in Nigeria, the Kaduna State government plans to collaborate with the state legislature to pass a law ensuring a 6 months of paid exclusive breastfeeding leave for working mothers in both public and private sectors. This is to promote breastfeeding and combat malnutrition and child mortality, according to the nutrition officer of the State Primary Healthcare Board, Mrs. Ramatu Musa. She said this during a community engagement forum with key stakeholders in collaboration with an international non-governmental organization as part of occasions to mark the International Breastfeeding Week. Currently, statistics from the Kaduna State Primary Healthcare Board shows that about 41.1% of children in Kaduna receive exclusive breastfeeding, with 4 out of 10 children meeting the recommendation, which is 6 months duration. While the Nigerian Labour Act currently permits 3 months of leave for lactating mothers with entitlements to at least half of their monthly wages, stakeholders have long advocated for a 6-month paid maternity leave to better support nursing mothers in their efforts to achieve optimal breastfeeding. Nigeria's coach Rina Wakama has become the first female coach to lead a team to victory in the Women's AfroBasket Championship final. Nigeria secured a 4th consecutive AfroBasket title by defeating Senegal 84-74 in front of a sellout crowd in Kigali, Rwanda. This victory also matches Senegal's record of 4 consecutive titles from the 1970s. Happy Wakama stated that winning the trophy was a significant sign for her. Meanwhile, in the 3rd-4th place playoff, Mali defeated host Rwanda with a score of 89-52. The Senate leadership has been tasked with engaging further with President Tinubu to find a resolution to the situation in Nigeria, given the friendly relations between the 2 neighboring countries. The Senate has also expressed commitment to supporting ECOWAS in resolving the political issue in Niger Republic. The Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, while explaining President Bola Tinubu's letter regarding the coup in Niger Republic, stated that President Tinubu sought the lawmakers' approval to implement Economic Community of West African States ECOWAS resolutions as the chairman of the organization, contrary to some reports. Following a closed-door session, Akpabio mentioned that the Senate condemned the coup and commended President Tinubu and ECOWAS heads of state for their swift response to the political crisis in the Niger Republic. Meanwhile, Nigeria's military junta must now reinstate removed President Mohamed Bazoum or potentially face military action from the ECOWAS regional bloc. Remember, the West African leaders had given the coup leaders a week to comply with their demands, which might involve the use of force. Meanwhile, thousands of supporters of the military coup in Nigeria have gathered at a stadium in Niamey. A delegation from the ruling National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland, CNSP, arrived at the stadium, receiving cheers from the supporters. However, there is growing online opposition in Nigeria against military involvement, as many fear the impact on their families and residents of part of Sokoto that is very close to the Niger border, and have expressed increased feeling of tension and anxiety due to the situation. Before then, Italy's government has reduced its troop presence in Niger to accommodate civilians requiring protection amidst a fragile security situation. On Saturday, a military plane carried 65 Italian soldiers and 10 U.S. soldiers from Niamey to Rome. More flights are planned to further reduce troops, but currently 250 Italian soldiers remain for counterinsurgency and military training missions. Previously, Italy evacuated 36 of its nationals and other citizens, leaving about 40 Italian civilians, primarily NGO workers, still in Niger. Moving now to South Africa, where the World Cup journey ended suddenly with a 2-0 loss to the Netherlands on Sunday. Gio Rode scored for the Netherlands early in the game, and Leonard Bernstein secured the second goal in the second half after a mistake by South African goalkeeper Kaylin Swartz. The Netherlands is now just 2 wins away from making it to the finals for the second time in a row. South Africa had done better than expected by making it to the knockout stage. Each South African player will go home with $50,000 as a reward. Next, the Netherlands will face Spain on August 11, while Banyana Banyana, South Africa's team, will have another chance at World Cup success in 2027. Away from Africa, Dubai has experienced a boost in tourism with a record-breaking 8.55 million international visitors in the first half of 2023. This surpasses the pre-pandemic figure of 8.36 million tourists in the same period of 2019, showcasing a remarkable 20% year-on-year growth. The data from Dubai's Department of Economy and Tourism indicates significant progress toward becoming the world's top tourist destination. The city's hotels have outperformed pre-pandemic levels across various metrics, boosting an impressive average hotel occupancy rate of 78%. Dubai's exceptional first-half performance solidifies its position as the fastest recovering global destination, surpassing expectations set by the United Nations World Trade Organization for international tourist arrivals to approach pre-pandemic levels. Now, due to heat-related illnesses affecting hundreds of scouts at a jamboree, South Korea's presidential office convened an emergency cabinet meeting and authorized the use of air-conditioned buses and freezer trucks. The heat wave, with temperatures around 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit, led to UK South scouts leaving the campsite early. Around 600 participants suffered from heat-related issues, prompting the deployment of military medical personnel. The World Scout Jamboree, hosting about 43,000 attendees, is taking place in Korea's North Jeolla province. President Yoon Suk-yeol ordered air-conditioned buses and refrigerator trucks for the Scouts' comfort, allocating around 6 billion won, approximately $4.59 million, in contingency funds. Moving now to the U.S. border officials are ramping up personnel and resources in Ejo, Arizona, due to an increase in migrants and a dangerous heat wave. They are prioritizing quick transportation of non-citizens to Border Patrol facilities for medical care, food, and water because a record number of people are crossing the treacherous Darien Gap. Ejo is under an excessive heat warning, with temperatures reaching 106 to 112 degrees Fahrenheit. Human smuggling groups are directing migrants to hazardous areas like Cabiza Preta National Wildlife Refuge and Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument. Migrants spend around 15 hours in custody at Ejo, with some waiting outside in a fenced-in area equipped with fans, meals, water, and bathrooms. In June, the Tucson Border Patrol sector had over 24,000 migrant encounters, making it the second busiest sector on the southern border. Fortunately, there have been no reported deaths at the Ejo station or its vicinity since the heat wave began and the rise in migrant encounters. The White House is urging federal agencies to transition more aggressively to in-person work starting next month, aiming to enhance the delivery of government services. Chief of Staff Jeff Zients emphasized the importance of returning to in-person work for the well-being of teams and better outcomes for the American people. Agencies will be implementing increased in-person work as it aligns with the president's priorities. This directive follows the White House Office of Management and Budget's previous memo in April, which called for a significant increase in in-person work by government employees at headquarters offices. And finally, the CEO of Twitter platform X, Elon Musk, has in a tweet offered to cover the legal cost of users who face unfair treatment from the employers due to their posts on the platform. He's also reinstated controversial figures like Kanye West, Donald Trump, and many others who were banned or suspended by the platform because of their illogical stance on issues. This move has reignited debate over free speech and cancel culture. Musk, known for his strong support of free speech, has been updating the platform's speech policy to allow diverse opinions within legal boundaries since taking over ownership in October 2022. On the other hand, he has announced his intention to have a cage fight with Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. The social media moguls have been playfully encouraging each other for a mixed martial arts showdown in Las Vegas since June. Musk shared his preparations for the fight on social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, mentioning that all proceeds from the live-streamed event will be donated to charity for veterans. What an interesting way to end the morning news update today. Thank you for watching. I am Blessing AG. Now stay for the rest part of any exchange.
Welcome back to the early exchange on Sook News. Once again, I'm Olaoluwa Awe and Ayojimi is here. It's time to now make sense of some of the items in the news. Thank you, Blessing AHA, for that. And joining us today to do that is Sam Orouje, the Director, Policy Research and Development, Femi Watch Limited, owners of Sook News and Walsh Radio. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Yes.
It's good to have you here again after a long while. How are you doing?
Thank
Okay, it's been a very busy, a very busy weekend for Nigeria and the rest of the world. So a number of stories made it to the headlines this morning. First of which is the intention of the NNPCL to join forces with NIPCO to roll out compressed natural gas by 2024, by the first quarter. And this is seen as a welcome development in so many quarters because it's taken off after President Tinubu's pledge to ease the burden on Nigerians with respect to the removed fuel subsidy. So we're having this kind of public-private partnership, which will ensure that we have over 7,000 plus vehicles running on CNG by the first quarter of next year. How do you see that?
I think it's a welcome development, and that will provide an alternative in terms of the fuel subsidy removal. So that would be a welcome development. I think Nigerians will welcome that, and we hope that beyond the statement, by March 2024, this policy should come into fruition.
Yes, talking about this partnership, it's really about coming up with CNG stations where people can take their vehicles to and get this compressed natural gas. So in the first phase, 21 stations will be rolled out. In the second phase, about 56 CNG stations will be rolled out. So do we need to do more to ensure that people embrace this alternative way of powering our vehicles? Or is that just what the government and the stakeholders need to provide to ensure that people really embrace this new way of doing things?
I think it's a, okay.
No, talk. Please,
okay.
Let's
I think it's a new policy initiative. So what you need to do is to do it in phases, and they are like baseline studies in terms of providing those alternatives. So first phase, those numbers of filling stations will provide those alternative energy. Another level till you get to such a point where the partnership is more sustainable, then you can upscale it nationally so that you can get a benefit derivable from it. So I think it's a welcome development. That partnership is welcome.
Just to support what you've said, really, government needs to show this kind of leadership. Government has said, okay, this is where we're going, this is where we are heading to, and then they must show that, okay, let's take the first step forward, because adoption is not an easy thing for a lot of people. We've been so used to petrol fuel cars, petrol-powered cars, and now we're moving to CNG. If the government is not taking this kind of partnership seriously and taking the first step forward, there may be this lag, this slowness of taking off in some quarters. But then, when you see your neighbors powering their vehicles on CNG, and you can see the economic benefits in terms of cost savings and maybe efficiency of fuel, then you will join. So it will be in phases, and I'm sure that after the first rollout, we'll just move on from there. And
but I believe one of the main issues here is the conversion of the vehicle from the petrol fueling system to the CNG fueling system. From my research, I think it costs between 200,000 naira to 400,000 naira. It depends on the vehicle you are converting. If it's a saloon car, if it's an SUV, it's a truck, and I think that's the main thing for a good number of Nigerians. How many people can afford 200,000 naira to 400,000 naira to convert their vehicles? Do you think there needs to be some sort of intervention in that area?
Well, maybe some, but one of the major challenges in life is change. So I think one of the critical elements that people are worried about is about the conversion at this particular point in time. But over time, when you look at the cost benefit analysis over a period of time, that 200 to 400,000 expense becomes more valuable to those who are able to convert. But normally, any new thing, and in marketing, there's what you call early adoption, which Ayo spoke to earlier. Gradually, people begin to embrace, and when you do your Naira and Kobo calculation, over time, you feel that the alternative source of energy will be cheaper, then people will embrace it more. So what is important is government to sustain that initiative. If there's a need to provide some form of incentive for the early adopters, that would be a welcome development to citizens.
I think it's more about what other alternative do you have. If there is no alternative, not because there isn't anyway, but if it's a more expensive alternative, you will abide by this one. After the initial cost outlay, essentially things become easier.
But before we move from that, do you think that more publicity still needs to go into this?
Definitely. That's why we're doing this here.
Yes, I think so. Those who are responsible for public information must upscale the information, the key benefits, even the cost benefits analysis should be put in the public space so that people can make their informed decisions in terms of alternative source of energy, empowering their cars.
Now, the World Bank has announced intention to collaborate with the Nigerian government to provide or construct 1,000 mini solar power grids in Nigeria. How do you think that will help our electricity situation?
Essentially, we know that what we're generating now can't really go round. There are a lot of communities that are not connected to the national grid, not because they don't want to, but because the infrastructure is not there. Now, we have our own system of generation, our own grid system, which for some reasons can't really serve our needs. So if we're now having this kind of collaboration between the World Bank that has the financial muscle to make it happen and Nigeria, and we're having 1,000 mini grids. As at now, we have just 150 mini grids that cannot power a population of over 200 million people. So with the injection of 1,000 mini grids in different locales, yes, more people will have access to electricity, and it will stem one tide, which is the tide of rural-urban migration, because a lot of people just move to the urban areas and create pressure here, not because they can't stay in their own villages, but they must have a means of power, which they don't. So these mini grids will, feed the system, and people say when you give an average Nigerian electricity, he knows what to do with it. He can make a living with it, because so many things are attached to the to power economy. That's the way I see it, Sam.
Sam, what do you make of it?
No, thank you very much indeed. I think that addition to the national grid is a welcome development, like I mentioned a while ago, on alternative source of energy. But what is important is that I think these projects are really targeting the rural communities, and the federal government has a rural electrification project. I think this is key into that initiative. So what again is important is the sustainability of those initiatives. To what extent can we sustain that rural electrification and solar energy as a source of energy, particularly transitioning from the other type of grid? And what is important, again, the government has equally deregulated that sector further. States and local governments now have the power to invest in power generation. I think by the time we do this collaboration with the World Bank and other partners, then we'll be able to light up Nigeria for greater efficiency in terms of power provision.
Another major thing I really think we should focus on, or another major area I think we should focus on, are fast developing areas that are not really rural, but are not really totally urban. For example, I know a community in Muwe in Ogun State, Ukenro, for the past 30 years, since people really started moving into that area. And don't forget that Muwe axis is between Ogun State and Lagos. So the place is not overly developed, but it's also not very rural. And they've not had transformers so that they can have access to
the national grid, right?
Electricity. They've been talking to the distribution companies because those, I wouldn't know why the distribution companies didn't give them a transformer, but if programs like this can also focus on areas like that, I think it should make a whole lot of sense. They are really developing areas within urban areas, not really very rural areas that really need interventions like this. I think it should make a lot of sense.
Yeah, when President Tinubu came to power, the sentiment in so many quarters is that, yeah, he is a pro-business person and he will bring in, I mean, his presidency would attract a lot of foreign participation. And if we are having this kind of promise from the World Bank, this is just a confirmation of what people have actually, you know, said about him. Now, when we bring in foreign investors into the power sector, things will change for better because we just have to be intentional. The issue of power has been a problem since the creation of Nigeria or since independence, as the case may be. People are saying that if the government is really intentional about this and allow private participation, power grids here and there, the blueprint has always been there. But then the political will to make it happen has been the lacking, you know, variable. This particular presidency is showing that political will to, you know, set the economy free, let the economy run on the forces of demand and so on. Let investors come inside and let's have participation from all walks of life. So this will go a long way. I know that 1,000 mini-grids will not solve our problems entirely, but it will go a long way. That's where I see it.
Of course it will. It will impact positively on the power generation.
Yeah, I also want us to talk about this development that the Nigerian Railway Corporation is warning passengers traveling the Lagos-Ibadan route to not fall into the hands of cyber criminals who are selling fake tickets online. And, you know, the corporation is saying that it has not started selling tickets online, so people should beware. But what will it really take the Nigerian Railway Corporation to have, you know, to sell tickets online? I know they've been running that route for a while now, and it's been pretty successful. So what will it take for us to begin to sell tickets online?
I'm actually one of those who ply that route, essentially. And we've been asking the same question because on weekends or during festive periods, it's always very hectic to get to buy your ticket and travel. All of us are being encouraged to, you know, ply the route, to go by rail because of, you know, the convenience, the safety, and so on and so forth. But we've been asking, why can't we just book online? While this particular warning comes in handy, okay, let us warn the public that we are yet to start selling tickets online. The question is, what does it take? Now, these people will hijack the initiative. If you're not doing it, some people will say, okay, we can do it. So while they are alerting the public about the fact that they are not doing it, they should expedite action. I took them up some time ago and they said, okay, maybe I should write to their head office or something like that. Maybe they can work on it. And I actually overheard a conversation that there have been proposals on their table for how to ensure that you take booking online for this particular rail service. But up to today, for some reasons not known to many of us, we are still having to buy tickets. But you can't even pay with your ATM. You still have to go there with cash. And during cash crunch in Nigeria, it was really hellish. So,
you know, Sam, I know small businesses that have landing pages where people can buy. They have simple websites where people can pay and even get goods. So why do you think it's taking this long for us to have an online platform where people can get real tickets?
Why not speaking for the Nigerian Railway Corporation? I think the challenge is what are the internal dynamics of that organization. But what is important is that because it's a public corporation, it's important that payment platform should be made online to facilitate their consumers or customers to be able to engage with service. In addition to that, if they pay online, that can sustain their revenue assurance where the money just go into the account. So one will not speak for them. I don't know why they are finding it difficult to provide an online platform for their customers. But what is important is that while they saying that they've not started online payment and some fraudsters are taking advantage of that. So they should quickly go to the drawing board and see how fast they can take that initiative to address that challenge.
And it would not be fair if we do the show today without congratulating our women's Afro-basket champions. They made it to the final and they won. Nigeria secured a 4th consecutive Afro-basket title by defeating Senegal, you know, over the weekend. You know, congratulations to the team, I must say.
Thank you very much indeed to the team. Beautiful.
The women teams are always making us proud. We still have our women soccer team, you know, doing us proud. They are to face England next, I believe.
Well, we want to say congratulations to them. We are proud that they are doing this, but then it doesn't matter whether you are a woman or you are a man. After all, we are all Nigerians. Yes. The glory comes to all of us, not just to the women folk.
Now it doesn't matter.
Because when we win football matches, I mean, we've won in the past. When we won football tournaments, it was a case of Nigeria winning, not Nigerian men winning. But notable is the fact that this is the first female coach to lead a team to victory in women's Afro Basket Championship final, and that for me is fundamental, because what a man can do, a woman is now doing a lot better. We've always said if you give women opportunities, they can show what they have got to do. And yes, I'm proud of you, all of you in particular.
Yes, the name of the coach is Rina Wakama. Let's say her name. But you know, you said something about it doesn't matter now. You know, whether man or woman, we are one. But when it's time to pay women, you know, athletes, when it's time to pay women, you know, footballers, you know, we see that dichotomy, and which is what we've been talking about. If these women are doing so well, why don't you even pay them equally or even higher, considering the fact that they are winning games?
Okay, there is the business side of sports that people are not seeing. You see, sports is a showbiz. Behind every show, there is a business. It's called show business. Now, how much money is the women competition generating as compared to their male counterpart? This is one of the factors you have to consider. When a match between Super Eagles and Brazil, for instance, cannot be compared with a match between Super Falcons, with due respect to them, Super Falcons and maybe the female team of Brazil, because the fact is that male football is still, you know, generating more traction, more followership, and let's not forget that even FIFA itself is in business to make profit. So they have to consider all these factors before they decide, okay, this is how much we're giving you. By this, I am not saying you should underpay women, but you see, it is business. Profit is part of it, and you must look at the cost to profit ratio before you decide on.
I think the women football is evolving, and one of the way to bring the evolution to quick fruition is to increase on the remuneration of them, so that we're gender sensitive, and we hope that the payments get to the same level. It's just the evolution, and we're going to get there with the women shortly.
Yes, I agree with you, Sam. And the encouragement doesn't have to come from FIFA alone. You know, companies can sponsor these teams. They're doing well. They're making us proud. You know, it's definitely not always government or constituted institutions, but we all can do our part, since they make us all happy whenever they make wins like this. But then let's quickly touch on what's happening in Niger.
Okay.
You know, AY.
Yes, the 1 week ultimatum that was given to them by ECOWAS member states has expired, and they are still not reinstating the ousted president. Now, the talk of a military intervention is ripe, even though some are expressing fear. The neighboring cities or towns, the Sokoto and the likes in Nigeria, they are expressing fear, genuine concern anyway, that is, because when war breaks out between two countries, like they say, when two elephants fight, only the grass is suffer. So they are expressing concern that, okay, maybe we shouldn't do war. But I believe that since the heads of the ECOWAS head of states will be meeting this week again, they will decide on the next way forward. I know there are so many other options that can be explored apart from, you know, the military option. Sanction is one of them, which has proved not effective now. But at the end of their meeting, they will come up with something meaningful that will be, you know, a win-win for member nations. We don't have to suffer collateral damage, basically because we want to intervene in another person's war.
I think I would prefer personally that the diplomatic option should be explored in the resolution of this conflict. Military intervention will not resolve the problem, because the Sahel region itself has been very sensitive, so we must take caution in trying to deal with these issues in Niger.
Yeah, we keep talking about diplomatic options, but how long would that take? You know, 1 week now, the junta is not backing down. They keep getting support from some other neighboring countries. Let's see how that goes.
Diplomatic option is still the best option in terms of conflict resolution.
We'll continue to monitor the development there.
Okay, so that will be it on this segment of the show, the newspaper reviews. We'll now take a short break. Now, when we return, we'll be looking at wildlife conservation and business practices. How do your actions as a business owner affect the balance of the ecosystem? We have just one, and we have to keep it balanced. This and many more we'll talk about when we return from this break. Please stay.
Maintaining environmental balance hinges on the vital role of wildlife, which stabilizes natural processes. Nigeria's forest reserves have emerged as crucial guide of wildlife conservation. While the agricultural sector holds promise, it offers more than just economic benefits, encompassing leisure, enhanced quality of life, increased GDP, job prospects, and food security. However, the country's limited number of substantial parks, gardens, and resorts suffer from underfunding, inadequate investment, and subsequent decline. This has spurred a call for private sector-led initiatives to revive and sustain national parks and wildlife resources. Pressing issues encompass habitat degradation resulting from unchecked logging, agricultural projects, industrial expansion, urban development, and highways. Experts agree that safeguarding wildlife resources is pivotal to securing food sources through agroforestry, fostering ecotourism, and enhancing mental and physical well-being, thereby reducing health burden and promoting longevity. To promote conservation, experts suggest increased federal involvement in establishing more national parks and joint responsibility with states for wildlife legislation. Investing in ecotourism parks, agroforestry, zoological gardens, and wildlife domestication is touted as a means to boost the economy through hospitality, tourism, catering, leisure, and recreational offerings. Grace Komolafe, Soup News.
Each time we wake up in the morning and we set out for the day's work, do we ever wonder if the air we breathe will run out? Because we keep taking from the earth, we keep breathing in air, we keep, taking in plants and, eating animals. But do we even think about how these things will be sustained over the years, or if we have taken too much from the earth? And that's what wildlife conservation is all about. It's all about efforts and actions taken to protect and preserve various species of plants and animals and their natural habitat, to ensure that they keep growing and we keep having more access to them. What do you think about that?
There is a particular balance that people are trying to make in their head. A holy book said you should subdue the earth. But people are not looking at the part of replenishing it. You are meant to be fruitful and to multiply while subduing the earth. A lot of us are focused on the subduing part of the earth. And part of the earth that we have to subdue are the fishes in the ocean, the wildlife in the savanna or in the rainforest. You keep subduing the earth. But like you said, nobody is paying attention to how will these things get back. Because there was a time when perhaps wildlife outnumbered human beings. I wouldn't still know what the ratio is. All I just know is that these days when you go to the villages, you hardly see some species of animals run by, unlike in the past. It's either they are wiser than before, and they now know how to fear you as a man, because some birds have learned to fly without perching because of our attitude, of our threats to them. The idea is that if we are not intentional about preserving what we have as natural resources, it's just a matter of time we'll exhaust them. You wouldn't, even when you see
already exhausting them.
Some zoos don't have lions again. People have an idea of lions only on paper. I know in your early days, really, I mean, there should be a lot of wildlife animals that now people don't even know what a squirrel looks like in real life. What is it to this?
I think those things, even though the ecosystem has been distorted by human efforts and activities, you still have some of those animals. But what is important when you talk about wildlife conservation is to see how we can protect and preserve those ecosystems, particularly plants and animals, so that the human civilization is not altered, because we have interdependency with animals, plants in the ecosystem. So I think we need to sustain the environment. I'm not a specialist in that area, but I'm just an enthusiast in terms of wildlife conservation.
Yes, we're not just talking about wildlife conservation today. We are also relating it with businesses. You know, how does it affect businesses, and what are the roles of businesses in ensuring that we protect, you know, the ecosystem, we protect how the natural way things work. And that's why we're going to be talking to the project manager at Lekki Conservation Center, Bose Kosemani. Bose joins us via Zoom. Good morning, Bose. Good morning, Bose.
Good morning, Bumi. I can hear you.
Oh, good.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Thank you very much for joining us. Why is it very important for businesses to get involved in wildlife conservation?
That's quite an interesting one. Wildlife conservation and businesses have been, would I say, partners? Because when you look at it, most of our businesses rely on the natural environment to thrive. And if we eliminate wildlife, look at the food industry, agroforestry, timber, you can name it, even the textile industry. We can't eliminate the natural environment from these businesses. So there's that partnership, or will I call it a symbiotic relationship, where it's more of a win-win situation for both businesses and the conservation world, if businesses in the long run could put the environment first. Because if we don't have these natural resources available, then businesses will not survive. Let me use that, permit me to use that word. So let's take an instance, the food industry. All of us, businesses, non-business owners, we all depend on food for survival. You can imagine if the natural environment were badly impacted, it would also affect us and those businesses.
Okay. There are some businesses that directly dwell on the ecosystem and impact on the ecosystem. For instance, those who are into tree felling, those who deal in timber, they must go to the forest to fell these timbers, and every tree they drop poses a threat to the ecosystem. Yet, you wouldn't say they should not be in business because they want to preserve the ecosystem. How should businesses strike a balance between staying profitable and preserving the ecosystem? Those kind of businesses in particular.
Okay. Thank you so much for your question. But when we look at the timber industry globally, or we call them extractives globally, be it timber or mining, you can't say a business shouldn't exist and in isolation of the environment. Is how best to carry out this activity. And one of the measures when it comes to timber, when you know you're extracting, you should also replant. And then when you look at certain trees, when it comes to timber, the Iroko, mahogany, and it doesn't take them 2 years to grow. It's a lifetime. So when you look at that, and that's what you want to harvest, you could also look at other options of timber to harvest. You look at the purpose for which you want to use that timber, and then analyze what the pros and cons will be. If you want to harvest an Iroko or a mahogany, then you have to think of also planting. You have something set aside, establish a nursery, raise new seedlings and all that. It's going to take years. And what we usually advocate to such businesses is make sure that you take out one, you plant 5 or 10. So it doesn't, you don't create a vacuum that you take out one and you're not looking back. But we also find that in most cases, there's the policy by the government that do not take, if you're taking one, plant 5 and all that, but it's the implementation that is now challenging. We also have, looking at it from the other angle of taking alternatives. I remember once British American Tobacco years ago was carrying out a tree audit. They work with tobacco farmers. And one of the conditions was that the tobacco farmers have good lots to cure their tobacco. That way they are not going into the forest, because the business was aiming to have zero deforestation. They didn't want a situation whereby they were going into, their farmers were going into the forest to cut down trees. So what they put in place, or part of the strategy that they put in place, was for the tobacco farmers to have woodlots where they have either melina or teak trees, which are fast growing trees and could easily be harvested for tobacco curing. So these are some of those strategies that certain businesses put in place, to ensure that the environment is not badly impacted. And once you cut down a tree, it's very important that you replace it.
Now, you talked about those into fish felling. Let's also look at the other types of businesses that really affect wildlife. Let's talk about fishing. Overfishing has been said to be a major problem. How do you, in that case, try to replace what you are taking from the waters? Another instance is those who are into mining. Their activities, affect the habitat, so the natural environment where fish grow, where plants grow. How can they ensure that they have responsible practices that also help to replace some of the things they are taking, or tackle the effect of their activities?
For every business, there is a risk attached to it. When we look at when we say overfishing, governments, would I say globally, it's overfishing is a global challenge. But then we can't just say, because it's a global challenge, that there are no possible solutions. If we look at the overfishing part, now it's what are the sustainable measures that have been put in place? Over the years, there's been the advocacy to use nets with bigger holes, so that the younger fish or the fingerlings can easily pass through, and it's only the matured fish that is harvested. And as much as possible, that kind of supports sustainability of the fish or wildlife within the water. But as I said, these are great initiatives, but who is implementing on the government side? Who is ensuring that these laws or policies are adhered to? That's on the one side. Then when you talk about the mining industry, it's quite interesting, because we have artisanal miners and we have the big companies that are also into this mining. So if we want to strike a balance that the impact of mining is affecting the environment negatively, there are regulations in place on how, best practice, ensuring that it is contained, and whatever the effluent or the waste from their mining doesn't really impact the environment. Or when they look at, okay, yes, this thing is going to impact the environment, what are the measures that we have to put in place and ensure that we minimize this impact? Yes, you can mine, it's going to affect the environment, but the after effect, how do we clean up this area to ensure that in years to come, we can always, or the communities or the people that live within this area will not be impacted negatively, be it the wildlife, even their health. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to, our well-being and the sustainability of animals. So there are policies in place, as I said, by government, but it's the implementing. who will be there to monitor these things to ensure that the mining company is carrying out their mining according to best practice.
All right.
And when you also criticize this, before a business starts, be it mining or construction, they always carry out environmental and social impact assessments. And these assessments also outline the risk associated with such businesses or conducting such businesses. There is a hearing, a public hearing. They talk about the species that they find therein within the environment, and they also talk about what they intend to do. And during that public hearing, people like you and me are supposed to air our opinions and give necessary advice to such companies on how best to go about it. At the end of the day, it is now, because it's the government that, it's a regulation. You have to conduct an ESIA, then the government, you have a public hearing, and then the government gets to give the nod of approval for such company to proceed.
Let me cut
so when we have
let me
this
so we can move on to another question.
Yes,
now
we have evaluated this resource.
You've been speaking to practices, ethical practices that can, help us preserve wildlife conservation. Talk about taking responsibility on the part of the government and of the people to ensure that things are done the right way. But there's this talk of wildlife corridors. Could you please explain what this means and how businesses are meant to interact or operate within these wildlife corridors?
For most responsible businesses, if I get your question correct, you're looking at business ethics within wildlife corridors.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
For most responsible businesses, when you start out within an area that is either a high carbon, there are two things, either a high carbon stock area or a high conservation area. When they say carbon stocks, more of plants that sequestrates carbon from the environment. And then conservation areas focus more on animals and the water resources there. So when you have this, most responsible companies, they set aside a portion of, the area wherein they operate to conserve plants and animals. And then they carry out, surveys to ensure that they've identified an area that is high in carbon stock and also has a high conservation value. And when they carry out that survey and such is established, they demarcate those areas and set it aside as their own way of contributing to wildlife conservation.
Now, let's talk about tourism. This is a line of business or an industry that has been greatly impacted or that can greatly impact wildlife conservation. So what are the things that needs to be done to ensure very responsible, tourist activities in different parts of the world?
Tourism, it's an interesting industry. A few years back, a lot of us would say, oh, it's a booming industry and nothing will happen. Then Corona struck and it's adversely impacted the tourism industry. So what are the few things that we could do as to support, will I call it, responsible ecotourism? Is more of it's people engagement, it's people that visit these places. And when we say tourism and wildlife conservation, the Lekki Conservation Center is an example. From the top of my head, I wouldn't go far. Lekki Conservation Center has been in existence since 1990. And we've had tons of visitors come here, or tourists come here over the years. So it's a nature reserve, not too big, but we have visitors coming year in, year out to see the animals in their natural habitat. So, and how we've been able to do it, we have do's and don'ts within the facility. You can't feed the animals, and we have a bit of environmental education program, nature interpretation, where we let people know what we do and what is permitted within the reserve. We also ensure that our wildlife officers are always on ground, to take in the tourists and make sure that they adhere to these guidelines and to ensure that they have a good time whenever they come here. We can't totally eliminate the fact that ecotourism suffered from the COVID pandemic, but we can also look at how best to push tourism forward in a sustainable way, such that people feel safe within that space, and even the wildlife too is not negatively impacted.
Okay. You mentioned environmental education program for visitors, essentially. There's another education program that goes on when people visit the villages and you see your grandpa going into the bushes and bringing out tons and tons, a lot of animals that he has hunted down. Silently, you are learning that, I can go into the forest and bring out animals and kill. But what more intentional efforts can we, adopt at the level of education, maybe in the primary schools, to tell these young ones that it is not sustainable? You just can't go there and bring out dead animals. You should find a way of inputting back live animals into the ecosystem. How do we start planning our curriculum at the primary level to, ensure that this becomes entrenched in our value system?
When we talk about indigenous knowledge transfer or knowledge sharing, as you say, from our grandparents onto us and as children, well, you also look at how we have a curriculum. You said primary school, to encourage children to also look at these things, that it's not the best practice, because now we have an ever-increasing population that is demanding for more, unlike in the past. So what we do is we engage schools, we have conservation clubs where we teach these children, be it primary, secondary, even up to tertiary level. We engage them, where we teach them that sometimes it's not necessarily about hunting, but it's something that for some animals, people could rear them. If you feel like eating bushmeat, there's the you can rear some animals, around you, and still some people rear guinea fowl now and eat them. So instead of you going into the forest taking hours to source for guinea fowl, it's something that you can have at your backyard and rear, just like some people have poultry birds that they do rear as well. But NCF over the years, since 1985, has been engaged in environmental education. We have over 500 schools across the country that are actively have conservation clubs, where we educate children on the best practice. Hunting, yes, I wouldn't totally say hunting is eliminated, because sometimes within, I'm sure some of us have seen it across the world, that sometimes when population of certain animals are exceeding the carrying capacity of a protected area or a forest, the government may say, allow people to hunt a certain number, so that the place is not overcrowded or overrun by animals, and it will negatively also impact those animals. But we can't also say that these things should be done anyhow. There's always a sustainable practice to it, to create a balance.
Speaking of sustainable practices, and since you said you've been engaging in educational activities like this, let's speak to the behavior or the practices we see here and there. Like, people see an unusually big fish in the water. We see videos like this from time to time. The first thing that comes is, let us kill the fish and eat it. People see maybe an animal they usually don't see crawl into their houses, the first thing they want to do is kill it. But we see some other countries or some other parts of the world where when they see things like this, there's always a number they can call. There's always somebody that they can call to come and pick those things up and take them to maybe back to their natural habitat. So what is the structure here in Nigeria? Since you said you do educational activities like this, what's the process?
Okay, the interesting thing is it's more of behavioral change. We are a people that over the years, I would say Nigerians are unique. Over the years, we see ourselves as once, as you said, I remember there was one flooding incident. I wasn't in country then, but I saw it and I wasn't feeling too good. I think 2 years back or so, I can't really remember the exact day, where people were pouncing on crocodiles and meat has come. They were even hawking those animals that they had killed. We still see them do it. Yes, NCF can't do it alone. And yes, we've been at it for a while, but we can't do it alone. That's why we need the support of the general public. And this is a platform to also encourage people to stop, killing or these animals. It's illegal. The law doesn't support it. And
Okay.
We'll get back to you in a moment, hopefully.
I don't know if you understand the question. For some other countries, there's a number you can call. There's an organization you can quickly call when those wild animals enter your space to quickly take them away. But what's really is the process here in Nigeria?
We have,
I think the challenge here is that in those other spheres, you're talking about animal rights. Even we have issues with human rights here, and you're talking about animal rights. What is important is to upscale the level of education, that once you deplete that ecosystem, is likely to challenge even your human existence. I think that's the core message that we need to pass to the general public.
And the message has to be passed emphatically, otherwise people will take it to levity. No, but to respond to what you said, there is this finish it all culture in this part of the world. I mean, when you see a strange fish pop up on the beach, for instance, you should be curious, really, not just bring out cutlass and start axing your way into the flesh of the fish. There is beauty in seeing some creatures that you've not seen before. I think we have this insatiable palate for consuming animals when we see them.
Even the ones that we see from time to time. For example, I still know people who see snakes crawl into their houses. In fact, this time last year, I still saw crocodile on the street. So what do I do? Do I, if I'm not to kill the snake and eat, what do I do with it? Who do I call? Do I pick it myself? Of course, a good number of us can't even stand snakes. So what do we do?
I would have loved to ask Bose that.
Yes.
Bose, if you're still there, can you please answer that question? Is there a number we can call?
Okay.
Okay, not there again. All right. I think we've done enough justice to that particular topic. It's been fun talking about, conserving our wildlife. People, otherwise, you see children see young lion, they see they are seeing a cat. They think they are seeing a cat. We need to, be very intentional about this because a lion is a cat, but then there are cats and there are cats. There are cats you play with, there are cats you must run away from. It's important for us to ensure that the things are kept in their places. They have a right to live also. You mentioned animal rights earlier.
Animal rights, yes.
Sam. These animals have a right to live also, even though we have a right to also consume because they've been given to us to consume. But your rights should not deplete a particular stock to one level beyond it can be replenished. I was about saying earlier that, okay, she said for every tree that you fell, you must plant like 5. At what rate? How many years does it take a tree planted today to grow into maturity? And how many years does it take you to fall maybe 1 million trees? These are issues that have to be considered in the supply chain management.
I think the replacement is for sustainability. So even if it takes years for the tree to be replaced, the ecosystem is sustained and the human race is equally sustained because we have interdependence with plants and animals. So it must be sustained in such a way that we sustain our lives as well.
Hopefully the next time we engage Bose or we have a conversation like this, we'll also talk about the incentives, to encourage businesses to, preserve wildlife and preserve the ecosystem? Because I know there are a good number of them. And just to harp on my points the other time, the government agencies, the institutions in charge of wildlife conservation, they need to do more to give people, simple information they can quickly put to use to solve the wildlife depletion problem we have.
All right, so that will be the wrap on this segment of the show. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll look at mergers and acquisition and their roles in business. It happens every time. Companies acquire companies, companies merge with companies. What are they, and why do they still have a say in the running of businesses today? There's something more we'll look at when we come back from this break. Please stay.
Mergers, acquisition, M&A can be a great way for companies to grow, expand their reach, and gain new capabilities. It can also be a risky proposition. If you're thinking M&A, these are things you need to know.
Mergers and acquisitions, M&A, are a common occurrence in the business world. These deals can have a significant impact on the companies involved and the market as a whole. These implications vary from companies depending on the specific deal. However, one common goal is to increase scale and market share among the general trends that can be observed. What are the thoughts of some Nigerians concerning merger of companies?
I think the reason for merging is, I think, to create a positive impact and also to help the society and also to bring what we call togetherness among the society also. Because when this is done, people, okay, some people do say, I choose this over this. So if they see these two people coming together, I think there's what we call unity among the people.
That they can come together in as much as maybe they know each other. One, and the only thing is maybe they want to expand and they don't have enough capital to start the business. So they can just emerge together like that so they can continue their business.
When two different entities comes together, it can enable them become a larger player in the market, giving the company a competitive advantage in terms of pricing, reach, and product offerings. M&A can also be used to acquire new capacities, like acquiring access to its technology, talent, or customer base, in turn helping to expand into new markets or to develop new products and services. These are some of the potential gains that can come from a merger or acquisition.
Company, they didn't have this going concern. That means tomorrow is blink. They didn't have the ability to pay actually all their bills. When I say bills here, the rent, production, and paying for their own workforce. And another thing that dragged them to this is maybe they have a lot of outstanding debts, a huge one and recurring one that they can't have the ability to pay back in that point in time.
Company like, I don't want to mention name though, so I think for some of the pharmaceutical companies, before they would think of maybe coming together to do some things together, there are some changes they think should be effected before they will do that. So I think there will be an importance there. There's going to be so many advantages.
This business style does not exist without some risks and challenges, as sometimes two companies might not integrate successfully. This can lead to financial losses, job cuts, and other problems. M&A can also have a significant impact on the market, leading to increased competition and some negative implication on the employees.
They must keep developing themselves, because is the only thing that is constant in this world is change. You must learn and relearn. Don't sit back. Every day try to improve in what you are doing and try to diversify. What do I do that will be new? Before, computer is not our business of employing people. Now even your what I call it, your own endeavor, your field is not computer. You try, understand, and have that skill with you. It's now one of the criteria to employ. Be you an engineer, be you an accountant, be you whatever.
M&A can be a powerful tool for businesses. However, it is important to carefully consider the implications of these deals before entering into them, with careful analysis of the potential benefits and risk. Grace Komolafe, Souk News.
Yes. Welcome back to the show. It's still early exchange on Souk News, and thank you, Grace Komolafe, for the report on merger and acquisition. Now, the history of merger and acquisition has been with us for as long as the history of mankind has been. There have been, cases of M&A in the past. Well, if that sounds a bit distant, even in the recent times, we all were alive when Facebook acquired Instagram. Instagram was not originally part of Facebook portfolio. Even WhatsApp was a part of Facebook portfolio. Then even back home here in Nigeria, we have Access Bank and Diamond Bank merged. That's a merger. So from time to time, companies see that there is a particular strength that is not resident within, and they see the strength in another company. So if they can have this corporate takeover called acquisition, they go for it and they acquire the business. Or if they think, yes, we can't acquire them, we can partner with them, they merge. So merger and acquisition they are like moves for businesses to leverage on individual strengths that are not resident in your own locale.
Yes, it gladdens me in my heart when I see two companies come together to achieve common goal. You know, partnership, we cannot underestimate the relevance of partnership. And, you know, sometimes policies come into play, some new policies come in, and you discover that as a company, you don't have all it takes to continue in that line of business. Then you see someone who has what you have, then you decide to partner with that person, or to merge with that company, or to acquire that company. Another major advantage of acquisitions majorly is when, you know, a good number of businesses are struggling. We've had businesses that have struggled in the past, and recently there's a trucking company in the US called Yellow that's had to, you know, close business because they couldn't pay certain debts and, you know, continue to pay workers. But you can imagine if that kind of a company is acquired by another major company, maybe along that line, to sustain, you know, the activities, to sustain the business, to sustain the workers. You know, mergers and acquisitions have come to the rescue of so many businesses, you know, since the start of business in the world. So it's really gladdens my heart to have this kind of conversation on Early Exchange today.
Okay, to have the conversation with us on Early Exchange today is Majoli Obaje, who is the PR and marketing head, GG Nigeria, one of the top 35 under 35 marketing professionals. Majoli, good morning to you.
Morning, and thank you for having me here this morning.
All right, good to have you on the show. Okay, we know that mergers and acquisitions have played their own roles in the evolution of markets across the world. Could you just speak to this in summary? How has M&A, or how have M&A contributed to evolution of the market across the world?
Amazing. Like we know, we've seen some great integrations over the years. I know particularly in 2019, we saw the case of Olam's acquiring a part of the business of Dangote worth billions of naira. Earlier mentioned on this conversation this morning, you had mentioned the case of Access Bank merging with Diamond Bank, and we saw how that went. So, you know, it's been a great journey so far, seeing how companies are able to compete, especially in the red ocean markets. You know, seeing how companies are able to come together to strengthen their processes and their offerings, to expand in their offerings and the likes. So, of course, mergers and acquisitions played a very vital role in stimulating industry growth and, of course, driving evolution across industries. So in this case, we see businesses coming together or merging to combine their resources, you know, their expertise, also expanding territories, right? And we see this play out most recently within the startup space, where a company starts up in Nigeria, and within their first 5 years, you already see them having presence in places like countries like Ghana, Kenya, and the likes. And what mergers and acquisitions does is it just makes it really easy for these companies to, you know, expand into new territories where like-minded businesses already exist. So, of course, mergers and acquisitions allow companies to achieve economies of scale. They're able to diversify their offerings and, of course, enter new markets. So, through consolidation, companies can, you know, streamline their operations. It also helps them to enhance innovation as well and create stronger competitive positions within the markets where they operate. And all of these come together to drive industry growth and progress.
Thank you very much, Majoli. It's good that we can agree that mergers and acquisitions have done more good than harm to different economies and industries all over the world. But what does a successful merger or acquisition look like from the standpoint of the business owners, the workers in the firm, and the investors in the businesses?
All right. So from the standpoint of business owners, a successful merger is one that is successfully closed with every party or every stakeholder happy. So there are cases where businesses are forcefully acquire other businesses, due to financial issues and some other issues at the top level. So in such cases, there's a party that is sad, that is really not ready to let go, but due to the financial crisis, as the case may be within the system, they just have to let go. The acquiring company goes bullish on them. So in such a case, it doesn't end well, because there's a party who is not really ready to let go, and there's a party who is forcefully acquiring. However, we've seen, successful mergers and acquisitions. And I'll give an example. The company where I currently work in, GG, we closed a merger with Cars 45, acquisition with Cars 45 in 2021. And it was seamless. And how did that happen? It was because both parties sat down. The acquiring party understood that we needed to combine, the strong heritage of GG's online presence with Cars 45 rich technology within the auto space, within the automotive space, that had to do with the ability of people to have their cars inspected across various offline touchpoints, over 70 offline touchpoints span Nigeria. So, it was a good one because it was a case of integration where we're going to combine the strong online presence of GG and, the strong offline and technological capabilities of Cars 45. It was a win-win because at the end of the day, we had a common vision, so now that's how you look at the success from the part of the business owners. Now, from the part of other stakeholders like employees and the rest, when an acquisition is happening, it starts with shivers or some level of uncertainty for employees because they really don't know. They really don't know. There's a lot of speculation. Oh, are they going to be job cut? So now where this can be really mitigated is where there is open communication, where strategies are well communicated from top to bottom, where assurances are made, where employees are made to understand their goals, are able to see the vision and also tie to the vision. So in this case, communication plays a very big role. Another thing is in cultural integrations. Of course, two businesses are coming together or one business is acquiring the other. So the employees want to see the bigger picture. It's important that they see the bigger picture of how the acquiring business tends to integrate the culture of the acquired business into the system to even make the processes more better strengthened, for success. So this rests a lot in communication, giving reassurances. Because at the end of the day, one of the big wins of acquisitions and mergers in industries is the fact that, it gives room for expansion, which means that there are more jobs. Imagining acquiring a business in a different region or a different terrain, what that means is more jobs. So you see cases where exchange programs become possible because someone is sent from Nigeria to Kenya, to train. There's intensive learning and development. There's also a huge investment in innovation, in learning and development. So these are the kind of things these are the kind of information that should be made available to the employees, from top to bottom to boost their confidence in the business's ability to ensure that the integration is successful and seamless.
All right, Majoli, thank you for that. One of the arguments against mergers and acquisition is the clash of corporate culture, which you referenced earlier there. For acquisition, it's a bit easier. If I'm acquiring you, I will probably superimpose my culture on yours because I'm taking over, really. But for mergers, it becomes a problem. I believe company A believes it has a better corporate culture, company B believes it has a better one, and there is a clash of the titans at some point. How do we address these challenges? You mentioned communication. Beyond just essential broad-based communication, what nitty-gritty things can we talk about to ensure that we tackle this issue of corporate culture clashes when we're talking about mergers in particular?
So the first thing is there's need to have an effective integration strategy, right? So while the conversations are still ongoing on the merger, there should be a strong attention to how the integration processes would work. So apart from transparent communication, which I mentioned earlier, both parties need to be a bit more empathetic, and culturally sensitive. So one of the best ways to approach this is to look at where both businesses have cultural grounds, so cultural similarities, and then build more on these similarities. So where there's a clash of culture, probably there are strong sentiments on both sides. That is where effective integration strategies would need to come in. Now, in this case, is where the both businesses might now need to engage, a third party communication consultancy firm who would now help them post through those areas where there seem to be clashes. At the end of the day, the focus should be on strengthening, integrating these cultures into one with the main objective of ensuring operational excellence, cultural excellence. So it means that company A must be ready to let go of maybe one or two cultural practices that may not even be healthy for the new system that is being created. So businesses must be open-minded, to let go, to shed the old skin, to give, room for the new skin, because now there's something bigger that they're working towards. And there are people, there's a lot, at stake in this process. So in this case, beyond the transparency in communication, being culturally sensitive, and all of that, there's need for an effective integration policy or strategy. And in most cases, of course, experts can now be brought into the equation to, serve as a common ground between both countries.
So majorly, a good number of times when we see mergers and acquisitions, we see this happen amongst big businesses. But let's talk about small businesses, startups. Is merging and acquiring something you would encourage for growth in this sphere?
So for small businesses, and this is what we see in the startup space, everyone goes into starting up a business with a vision. And the ultimate goal is to see this vision survive, is to see this vision, grow into something bigger where you begin to see the impact of the vision. Now, acquisition is encouraged in a case where the business is constantly going downwards, right? Better to see this business acquired, integrated into a stronger system, that has the financial backing to revive the business, to absorb the strength of this business as well, to absorb its people, so that it survives, rather than just letting the business die, right? So in such a case, it is strongly encouraged, right? And then there's something that mergers and acquisitions do in industries. It just makes businesses a lot more aware of their environment. So you see them investing a lot they invest a lot in research and development because they need to keep innovating to have that edge over competition. So, it encourages healthy competition amongst businesses. So for businesses that are unable to remain afloat, why not? Why not? We've seen cases where founders, sell off their businesses to stronger market forces, and then they later go ahead to birth new businesses. So it's something that should be encouraged in a case where a particular business is going downwards, or there's some form of management crisis that has gone beyond control, or has gone beyond resuscitation. Yes, it should be encouraged. However, for businesses that are still doing well, might have some financial challenges, but are still very much in competition, they might just still want to give it a few more years to see how they're able to coast through their challenges and come out a lot stronger. And in the case of such businesses, they might also want to consider a merger, because in the case of a merger, the business is not being acquired. Rather, two businesses are coming together to join forces. So one business might have strong operational capabilities, while the other business has maybe strong financial backing, so they can come together to create something really, really stronger, and of course expand their offerings and territorial strength. So these are the dynamics that we can look at the case of merger and acquisition for smaller businesses from.
Okay, that's very interesting to know that even small businesses can, go into mergers and acquisition if they are egos. I mean, the founders' egos will allow that to happen. That's a very big if in the first place. Now, let's look at knowledge transfer during mergers or acquisition, because I do know that the best heads in company A they are reserved and preserved in the deal. While maybe the not so appreciated others are let go. But one would have thought that there should be a platform for skill transfer from this particular company to this company. How should companies go about this? Because the whole idea of merger, the way I see it, is to leverage on each other's strength. So if you have skills in one company, why don't we train others in this company? Why do people get laid off? Because the talk of merger for most companies brings down fear, down the spines of the workers. Because wait, if I'm found wanting, I'm out of the door. Why are we not looking into skill transfer and skill training for the partnering companies?
So I wouldn't say we're not looking at skill transfer and skill training for partnering companies. Now the thing is, the moment the downlines get to know about a possible acquisition or merger, of course, these speculations become real. People get jittery, people become afraid, and this is where communication, I've been stressing a lot on communication, because at times what rumors do, is to create this kind of fear where people even begin to resign without even knowing their place in the new system. So that's where communication really comes in. However, to address this question more extensively, businesses need to focus more on creating cross-functional integration teams. So this is the first step. So from company A, there are people who are probably very skilled in certain areas. From company B, there are other people, and then they have what we call the exchange programs, where these guys carry out trainers training or train resources from the other companies on in order to increase their knowledge about the operations of the group. So of course, cross-functional integration teams must be set up. This is the first step. So this is the first step to boosting confidence of people to know that there's going to be some level of training exchange, knowledge transfer. And of course, conducting cultural assessments. That's another very important one, because when these assessments are conducted, both partners get to understand where their people fall in at the moment and the areas of training needs that need to be emphasized or focused on. So these are specific things that need to be done. We can also talk about mentorship programs. Mentorship programs is a case where we can make team heads can be made to engage their team members to understand why the business is entering this merger, why this acquisition is happening, and where the team stands in this conversation in terms of knowledge transfer, integration into the system. Our role is going to be changing, our title is going to be changing, so all of these things are things that businesses can do to boost the confidence of their people. And then these activities would also facilitate skills transfer and capacity building, so boosting the confidence of the people. That way, the fears are subdued and they understand that they have a place in the new system. However, one of the things that cultural assessment would also do for employees, or capability assessment, is make them understand areas of improvement that are needed. So beyond the businesses carrying out these assessments, exchange programs, and trainings, the people themselves need to also go a step ahead to acquire relevant skills that will make them competitive in the new structure, that will make them relevant, for the new structure. So this is also where the various departmental heads or leaders also come to play, because they should also be readily available to advise their members on relevant areas of improvement. They must
Thank you.
fit in well into the new system. So
Thank you
it's
very
a push
much.
and pull effect at the end of the day. The business has its own role to play. Both businesses coming together have their roles to play. The people as well have their roles to play to ensure that they fit into the
Thank you
new
very much, Major Lee.
system.
Now, let's talk
Of
about
course,
this
then, open
merger and
communication as well.
acquisition processes as a whole. For small businesses that are considering merging or acquiring other businesses or being acquired, what are the step-by-step processes they must go through? What are the things they must do? Are there documents they must sign? Are there activities they must engage in to ensure a successful merger and acquisition?
Okay, so to begin with, first of all, they need to look into their books. You know, they need to summarize the current state of their business, and this is where they also get in external auditors to look into their books and then check their assets, liabilities, and all the likes. You know, to decipher the current state of the business, the financial strength or weaknesses of the business, the assets, the current asset base of the business, the resource base of the business, and there are also organizations that are specialized in, you know, taking on conversations with whatever businesses they're looking to acquire, taking on the conversations, bringing both parties to the table, and then of course expressing their offerings, right? So there's a party that is saying, this is what we have, this is what our books look like, these are the resources we have, this is our current headcount, these are our current liabilities, these are our current financial states, these are our current debt profile and all of that. And there's a business that is saying, oh, we would love to acquire you because we see this, we see how we can, you know, resuscitate this part of your business, how we can, you know, invest in this part of your business, your learning and development and the rest of them, research and your research and innovation and the likes. And then this is what we are offering. You know, so they go into a form of negotiation. In most cases, there's a third-party organization specialized in handling these conversations, guiding them through documents that must be presented, documents that must be prepared, and then they go into the negotiation phase. The back and forth is done. They finalize, they exchange, they do their reviews. Both facilities are visited. You know, relevant stakeholders are engaged, and then, of course, the acquisition of the merger happens. Okay. And all of this also happened within the frame of a legal backing, within the frame of legal support.
All right, because our time is almost up, yes, let me quickly ask you. You mentioned the fact that a third-party company oftentimes is the midwife of this M&A. Could that third party be a government regulatory body? What would be the role of these regulatory bodies in ensuring that we have a responsible M&A? Question one, does government have a role to play in this third-party positioning to guard merger and acquisition? And if yes, what does government do exactly to promote, you know, responsible M&A between companies?
Great. That's an amazing one. So definitely governments and regulatory bodies have a role, which is to ensure that there's a responsible, you know, and transparent process, you know, to ensure that at the end of the day, rights are not being infringed on. There's a responsible process through which these mergers and acquisitions are done. So governments and regulatory bodies can actually enforce transparent reporting requirements, right? Transparent, that's a very, very key one. And then they conduct this through antitrust reviews. You know, they encourage due diligence to ensure that the transactions align with the broader society and the economic rules of the country. So there are government agencies that exist to review the requirements to ensure that requirements are enforced, and then there are antitrust agencies that review these documents that are tendered to ensure that, you know, they're correct, you know, and then there's no undertone of fraud happening in the conversation. So they encourage due diligence to ensure that transactions definitely align with the broader goals of society and our economic space as well.
Thank you very much for your time on Early Exchange today, Major Lee Obaje. You know,
Thanks
the
a
business
lot for
tips.
having me.
Yeah, welcome.
Enjoy
Thank you very
the
much.
rest of
Yes, you too.
Yeah.
You know, I think I'm a
Bye.
little bit more relieved now. You know, when I hear that a company is being acquired, I won't be so worried for the people working in the company. You know, just you mentioned about that concern, you know, that some workers have when they hear that another big company is coming to acquire them. They feel like, am I going to lose my job? But I think with this conversation, we know more about mergers and acquisition in Nigeria.
Oh, well, there is more to mergers and acquisitions that meet our eye.
Yeah.
Yes, these are good submissions, and I want to say thank you for clearing the air on so many issues there. But you know, if you've never experienced it, you don't understand what it looks like. Essentially, that's just the reality of it all. But maybe with the benefit of having the government and some other third-party agents, like she said earlier on, you know, midwifing the process, we'll do it better because there are global best practices for mergers and acquisitions across the world. Okay, we'll go on a very short break now. We'll join Austin Okere as he gives us some business tips here and there. Then when we're back, we'll look at something else on this show today. Please don't go away. Watch this from Austin Okere.
Great team must have people that have character, the first C, competence, the second C, and commitment, the third C. In an earlier impact, I shared the 5 forces of transformation, being vision, team, time, resources, and resolve. And we had agreed that the one that we could do something about effectively and quickly is the team, making sure, in essence, that we have the right people on the bus and we have the right people sitting on the right seat in the bus. What are the considerations of selecting a winning team? In my view, there are 3 critical C's that must come into play for every member of a winning team. And the first C is character. It's important that we have common values, all the members of the team, to reduce friction. Where do we draw the line in the sand? What will we do according to our moral compass, and what will we not do? What are the behaviors that lead to the values we have professed? Character. So every member of the team must have above board character. The second C is competence. This is mainly the rigor of your logic, knowing everything about your area. A lot of times, and more often than not, we do have that rigor of logic. It's usually our communication of our logic that is faulty. The last one, but not the least, is commitment. During the era of COVID, when we pivoted to online work, lots of people got, 1, distracted, or 2, trying to do 2 things at the same time. So they are not working for only one project or one company. I mean, even if you are freelance, when you are on a project, you face that project squarely. When you don't have that commitment as a team member, you breach trust and you cause the team to have a common breach of trust, which causes friction. People want to feel that you've got my back and I've got your back. And when they don't feel that, then everybody leaves the load. So a great team must have people that have character, first C, competence, the second C, and commitment.
In recent years, Africa has emerged as a hotbed for sustainable investing, attracting international attention and funding for eco-friendly projects across the continent. With a focus on environmental conservation and community development, sustainable investments are paving the way for a greener and more prosperous future. One of the most significant areas of sustainable investment in Africa is renewable energy. International investors are backing solar, wind, and hydroelectric power projects, helping to bridge the energy gap and provide access to clean electricity for millions. Solar farms and wind turbines are springing up, harnessing the abundant natural resources of the continent and reducing reliance on fossil fuels, ultimately curbing harmful emissions. Sustainable investing in Africa is not limited to energy. Investors are also supporting eco-friendly agricultural initiatives that promote responsible farming practices and improve food security. By adopting sustainable farming methods, African communities are safeguarding their natural resources such as soil and water for future generations. These efforts are not only enhancing productivity, but also empowering local farmers to become self-sufficient and economically resilient. Africa's rich biodiversity and stunning landscapes have attracted travelers from around the world. Sustainable tourism initiatives are now gaining momentum, offering visitors an opportunity to explore the continent's natural wonders while contributing to their conservation. Ecotourism do not only generate income for local communities, but also raise an awareness about the importance of protecting endangered species and fragile ecosystems. Sustainable investing is proving to be a win-win scenario for both investors and African economies. Responsible businesses are not only generating profits, but also leaving a positive impact on the environment and society. This approach is attracting more responsible investors who recognize the potential for long-term growth while contributing to global sustainability goals. Governments across Africa are increasingly prioritizing sustainable development. They are implementing policies and creating a conducive environment for responsible investment to flourish. By working hand in hand with international partners, African nations are strengthening their commitment to a sustainable future that balances economic growth with environmental stewardship. As the world faces pressing environmental challenges, sustainable investing in Africa is becoming a beacon of hope. The continent's vibrant potential and commitment to sustainability are driving positive change, not only for Africa, but also on the global stage. With continued support from responsible investors, Africa is poised to lead the way towards a greener and more prosperous future for all. As the world faces pressing environmental challenges, sustainable investing in Africa is becoming a beacon of hope. The continent's vibrant potential and commitment to sustainability are driving positive change, not only for Africa but also to the global stage. With continued support from responsible investors, Africa is poised to lead the way towards a greener and more prosperous future for all. Grace Komolafe, Souk News.
Welcome back to Early Exchange. Earlier on the show, we talked about how, businesses and individuals shouldn't just care about money, but we should also care about our environment, care about the society, care about the forest and the animals and the things around us, because largely they determine how far we can go and how sustainable our businesses are. But we're getting into the second lap of this conversation. Now we are talking about not just business processes now, we are talking about investment and how we can use that to to boost the ecosystem. But let's talk about it. Why do you think it's really very important to not just care about the business processes, but also investment?
Before the advent of this particular point in the history of mankind and the history of businesses, the focus of businesses was solely on profit maximization. They will tell you then that the purpose of a business is to make profit and make life better for those who are the stakeholders, be they owners, managers, or the workforce.
And by extension, the purpose of investment itself is to make more money.
So, but after a while, talks began to dominate the landscape that a business should be much more than the profit. So the ESG factor came into play. The environmental factor, that is the E, the social factor, and the governance factor, because you are not running your business in isolation. You are playing within a particular environment. And if you are not impacting positively on the environment, what you sow is what you reap back. So you owe the environment, and by environment, we don't mean in the context of conservation, it was just the forest. Now, environment now goes beyond just forest. Talk about even the people around you. What kind of impact do you have as a business on their lives and on their sustainable living? So this is where the talk of sustainable investment comes into play. And I'm glad that a lot of countries in Africa and even beyond are focusing on this. When you hear businesses like renewable energy projects, microfinance and clean water projects, and so on and so forth, these are part of sustainable. What makes it sustainable is because they are paying attention to those three factors: the environmental factors, the social factors, and the government factors. Sam, your take on that?
All right, thank you very much. For business to behave responsibly, they have to invest in their social environment. And what this speaks to is that as you do business within a particular environment, you must equally take care of that environment. So it's like giving back. It's simply called corporate philanthropy, where you apply back some of your profit into the environment so that you're able to sustain your environment, and that sustain your business as well, because the environment, the business itself depends on the environment. So for sustainable growth and development, you need to equally invest socially into the environment. So it's an ethical consideration. It's part of the corporate governance structure that most businesses must subscribe to and sustain the business practice, morally speaking.
It's good that you brought in that angle, because one can look at sustainable investing in two ways. It could be, how can I invest my money in something that would also improve the environment, that would fetch me return, but directly or indirectly also, improve the ecosystem. And the other angle you brought it into is that companies, companies outrightly, allocating certain amount of money intentionally to promote certain positive social occurrences around them, factoring in the impact of their own activities on the environment. And that's why you talked about corporate social responsibility, outrightly not caring about, okay, how much am I going to make if I put this money, but I'm just putting in this money into certain activities to help the people around me, to ensure that my environment is clean and better. But we need to talk about the reasons for these things. There's been so much conversation about climate change. Different countries are warming up. Countries are getting hotter. There's certain things happening right now environmentally. And there have been conversations about reducing our, carbon emission and all of those things. And that's why it's very important that these things, when we say we want to reduce the carbon emission, it will not happen by itself. Money needs to be put into it. People need to invest in things like that. We need to put our money where our mouth is. Don't you agree with that?
I actually agree, absolutely. See, I keep saying it's a plug-and-play world we live in now. The entire world is talking about going green, talking about being sustainable, talking about paying attention to the impact of your business on your environment. You'll be left in the cold if you don't plug in, because they're asking you to plug in not just for themselves, but for you as well, because you stand to benefit. If you look at Africa in particular, we have diverse resources. So when they are saying plug into maybe sanitation, environmentally clean water business, you're like, okay, what does that mean? If you're telling you to, preserve your biodiversity, if you're not savvy, if you're not very well informed, you think, okay, it's just for them. It's not just for them, because you are not living in isolation. So a number of factors, like you said, have led to the increase in the awareness about this talk of sustainable investment. One is that there is market growth opportunity. When you look at Africa, we have not really scratched we are still scratching the surface when it comes to what we can do on a sustainable investment level in Africa. We have a lot of wildlife here, we have a lot of forest here. So we are endowed with natural resources, and we are not tapping into them as much as possible.
Let me quickly add to that. There's a growing market of consumers that are demanding for sustainable business processes. For example, there's a growing number of people that if you are a company and you are selling this, and they investigate into how your production process is, and they don't find you having a sustainable production process, they will not patronize you. Because as movements around against climate change and all of these things begin to grow bigger, there's also a growing market for people that want to see and they want to know that you are doing things in such a way that the environment is preserved. So if you don't tend to that growing market, then you'll be losing a lot. I mean, it's a growing market that any wise business should really tap into. Oh. It's one of those reasons to consider sustainable investment.
And even some companies benefit from impact investing funds. If you're not making impact in this direction, you don't get there. Okay, we are not alone on this discussion. We have standing by Bade Adeshemowo, who is the co-founder at Social Lender. He has over 20 years experience in technology, particularly in software, and he has led a team in design, development, deployment, and so on and so forth. Bade, good morning to you. Welcome to Earlier Senior Soup News. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We're talking about sustainable investment, particularly on the continent of Africa. How do you think investing in sustainability can boost the social landscape and economic fortunes of Africa?
Well, so it's very simple. The world has realized that, I mean, if we're looking at sustainable investment, you would be looking at both the environment and then the social impact and so on. The world has realized that we can't just keep making profits without thinking about how we are making the profits, how we are moving forward, how we are growing, how we are developing. And so one of the things that the world has started looking at is obviously the fact that how do we make sure that whatever it is that we're doing, we don't leave a footprint behind. We leave a planet available for the next generation. And so that's the reason why we're having this conversation. From an economic side, there's a lot going on. And from an environmental side, there's a lot going on in terms of sustainable investment, trying to push people to things like solar power, clean power, and so on. But then on the social side as well, we realize that there's a high amount of people who are poor, who are not able to benefit. And then we know that we have things like food wastage and so on. So there's a lot going on in the space.
So what are the key economical or environmental factors that investors should consider when evaluating opportunities for sustainable investment, especially in Africa?
Well, one of the key ones that investors should start looking at is beyond the bottom line, beyond the returns on investment. We need to also start looking at what is the carbon footprint, for example. So if you're looking at power projects, if you're looking at infrastructural projects and so on, one of the things we should be looking at is how can we encourage things like recycling, for example? How can we encourage things like using the right materials? How can we encourage things like using clean power? How can we encourage those kinds of indices in addition to obviously the bottom line? We call this investment, not grants, not and so when we say investment, at the end of the day, there will be a return on investment, a return on the money spent, but it may be slightly longer, it may require a bit more focus.
Okay, I like the fact that you submitted in your first speech earlier that it's about environmental stewardship, which contrasts sharply with our own concept of environmental ownership. Because when you see yourself as a steward of the environment, it is different from seeing yourself as the owner of the environment, essentially. Now, let's look at the African continent, essentially. In what ways do you think sustainable investing will align with our unique social and economic, challenges? As Africans, we have our own unique challenges. In what way do you think sustainable investing aligns and corrects all those anomalies that we have in Africa?
It aligns 100% because at the end of the day, what we're looking at doing as individuals now is that we're trying to make a living, right? Individuals are trying, let's use farming, for example. Farmers are trying to make a living. Basically, I want to plant my crop, I want to harvest the crop, I want to sell it, and then I want to be able to do that again every season. Right. Now, what we're saying around sustainable investment is that can we take a look at how you are doing those processes? Can we take a look at what kind of fertilizers you're using? Can we take a look at things like composting, for example? Can we take a look at how that is transported? Can we make sure that wastage is reduced? Can we look at where that is going at the end of the day? Can we make sure that in terms of adding value, all of those things are done in a way that will be carbon neutral if it's not carbon positive.
Now, let's talk about some of the successful impact investing initiatives that have made a significant difference in African communities. Because if you look at things now compared to some other developed countries, you would think that maybe it's only in countries like the US or in the UK that people factor in sustainable investment. But I believe one or two things have been done in our continent. So can you speak to that?
Well, so I'll speak from, because I mean, when we speak about sustainable investment, it's not just around the climate and all. So I'll start with what has happened with us. So I work in a company called Social Lender, and one of the organizations that invested in us is basically EFINA project, EFINA Impact Fund, helping us to focus on registering people for BVN, giving them financial literacy in the offline market. These are people that lack access to financial services because they are not financially included. And there was this fund that was made available to say you can go into the villages, you can go into the local communities, and you can educate them around financial, how they can use finance and how they can get on board into the financial ecosystem. We're able to do hundreds of thousands of people, bringing them on board for the first time into that ecosystem. And so that's one of the examples. But then you can look at other examples at a larger scale as well. There's the AFDB projects around Desert to Power, AFD project. You will see a lot of solar projects as well, solar power, because one of the key ones in this current climate is us trying to make sure our power is clean. And so there's a lot of investment going on in there to get us clean power, whether using wind or using solar.
Now, if I go by what you have said, a good number of the investments in Africa are more towards the social sustainability programs or initiatives and not majorly environmental. If you check the investments we've seen in the environmental sector, it would be foreign investments, foreign companies, foreign institutions trying to pump in money to ensure sustainable practices in Africa. How can we balance things up such that even African investors, they see the value in environmental investments?
I think we're moving in the right trajectory, and over a period of time, it would become the norm to say that whatever investment it is that you're making, that investment has to be sustainable. I believe that that's the direction that we're going in. Let's not forget that for the West and for the foreign investors that we're talking about, let's not forget that they've had many years of that investing in the first place, right? And there are schemes like carbon credit, for example, where I'm simplifying it, but what carbon credit sort of talks about is that the people that have been polluting in the past, right? You can invest in the African economy, you can invest in African farmers being able to use sustainable practices, because the challenge today is that some of those practices are more expensive. Some of those practices today would be that, why should I be doing it? If I could do it in this way to cut corners, why should I be doing it in this longer way that will cost me more, right? And that's where carbon credit then comes in to say, let's plug that gap to say, we will pay you that extra so that you can continue doing what you should be doing in the first place, because we know that our planet is dying and we need to do something about it. In terms of our own investors, I believe that over a period of time, they would also come into that fold, because over time, as these things scale, and it scales to a point where it becomes that your best investment are the sustainable ones, they would definitely jump on the bandwagon.
All right, let's look at the entire business spectrum in Africa. Would you say there are specific, sectors or industries that can really plug into sustainable investing, or it's an all-commerce affairs? In essence, can all businesses adopt sustainable investing practice, or it is just suited to some businesses in Africa?
I believe so. Yes, you could say that there are some that are low-hanging fruit. So if you think about manufacturing, if you think about infrastructure, if you think about construction, those are low-hanging fruit because they are one of the highest polluters and so on. But the truth is that it's across the entire economic, social, and the entire social system, really, where we need to look at ESG. We need to look at it. I spoke about what we are doing, for example, and that is in finance, in fintech, right? But then in many other sectors as well, there are opportunities. There are opportunities for recycling, for example, in every business. There are opportunities in every business to say, what is this our bottom line? Are we net zero at the end of the day? Yes, we can look at our Western counterparts to say, yes, many companies are coming back to say by 2050, by 2040, we will be carbon neutral. The question is that when are we going to start looking at that within the African context?
We're talking about environmental initiatives, we're talking about social initiatives. Now, let's talk about the government part of it. What role should the government be playing in all of this? And are they really playing it well?
That's a tricky question. Are they playing it well? The truth is that you could say because government right now is focusing on survival, trying to focus on ESG and so on may be difficult to do, right? So it's a tricky question. However, there are things that the government can do. So we had many countries of the world promising to say by 2080 and so on, we would do a number of things, right? In the summits that happened last year, right? Those are things that we can also start taking a look at. Yes, there are bigger issues to deal with, but the truth is that we can deal with those bigger issues and at the same time taking a look at ESG. Government can help with policies, right? Yes, we may say that, yeah, we don't want to do those policies to harm the growth that we currently need. We don't want to make those policies to harm the fact that investors would now find it not appealing to invest at all. But then we can look at those policies to say it would be a long-term thing to help us get to a point where we as a country are also helping the planet.
Okay, let's go continental, not just Nigeria this time around. How can sustainable investment help to address inequality, income inequality across the African landscape?
Yes, so I'll go back to the example I mentioned. Income inequality comes from several challenges, but one of those challenges is economic inclusion. Because if people are included, people are able to do better in terms of how they use finance, for example. Let's use finance because that's my field. People are able to be included. Right now, across Africa, about 50% of adult Africans are financially are either underbanked or unbanked, about 50%. Now, that's a huge market. And part of the reason why that is there is because the cost to serve is very high. The cost to serve these individuals are very high. They can be profitable, but not profitable in the short term. They'll be profitable in the long run. They'll be profitable over a period of time in terms of the lifetime value of the customer. Now, the challenge is that for most investors, what we're looking at as investors is how quickly can I make my return? And so looking at people that would take years to give me a return would be very unappealing. What we then want to do from an African context is that how do we make that market more appealing to investors? How can we reduce the barrier to entry? How can policy help to make sure that these people get included?
Now, let's also talk about some of the challenges that investors face when trying to incorporate cultural and local perspectives to sustainable investment. You mentioned the fact that return may be slow. Are there other challenges they face along that line?
Yeah, so the average investor, and I'm also an investor, the average investor doesn't really care. The average investor cares really about his return. And so if you're going to your board to say, hey, we're going to change our mandate and we're going to incorporate ESG into the mandate, right? The question is why? Is it because we are now Father Christmas? Is it because we are now an NGO and so on? And so the challenge is also around information. The challenge is also around making people aware, making the investors aware, making the shareholders aware to say, we have this responsibility. We have this responsibility to be sustainable in the way we think, sustainable in the way we do things, and sustainable in the way we invest. That's one of the challenges. And these programs like this, just having that conversation, helping people to think about it, to say, what is my impact in this planet? What is my impact in terms of how well is the companies I'm investing in? And in the future, also the companies that I use their products, how well are they doing in this mandate that I believe every human should be thinking about?
Okay, so let's go to the finance sector that you actually play in now. Definitely, when we talk about sustainable investment in other sectors, apart from the finance part of it, it calls for money. What kind of handshake exists between those who are into the finance part of the sustainable investment spectrum and those in other parts? How easy do they access facility if you know that, okay, they are challenging towards sustainable investing, essentially?
How easy? As at this moment, it's not. So as at this moment, it's not extremely easy, because at the end of the day, what the financier will be looking at is not, oh, is this sustainable? At the end of the day, what the financier is looking at is that will this return our capital within a short period of time? That's what financiers are going to be looking at. But that's why companies like us exist, and that's why other companies also exist that are doing similar work out there. And one of those examples I gave earlier is the fact that there's, in Nigeria alone, there are over 30 million people that fall into that category that they don't have BVN today, right? They don't have the bank verification number today. And that's a huge number of people. And think about it, you may say, for viewers watching at the moment, to say, well, I don't know anyone that doesn't have a BVN account, a BVN number. But the truth is that there's a huge number of people that don't at the moment, even in the Nigerian context. And so the question would be that, can we make finance available to get these people banked? Can we make finance available to get these people better served with other products as well? So we're just talking about the basics of banking at the moment. We're not talking about insurance, we're not talking about pension, and several other things that are needed in that space. And so there's a lot to do. And what we would need to just continue doing is also education. What we need to continue doing is to say that there's this huge problem that we can solve. So if you can just direct, let's say 10% of your profit, if you can direct 1% of your profit and so on into that, solving that problem, it may help in the long run. And that's where government may also come in, because, for example, many organizations have to spend about 1% of their profit into education at the moment in Nigeria. We may want to do something similar for ESG goals.
Yes, we have established the fact that the interest for local investors to even want to get into sustainable investment is quite low, and it's a major challenge. But can't we latch on to our cultural structures to drive this home and improve interest in sustainable investment?
We can, and I think we do to some extent. It's just not at scale yet, and that's the problem that I believe that you're pointing out. It's not yet at scale. Cultural in the sense that I've seen churches try to talk about things like recycling, right? Just separating your dirt, for example. I've seen businesses that are collecting plastic, for example, and using that for much more. The only challenge is that at the moment, it's not yet at scale. And so what we need to do is gradually look at some of those touch points, traditional institutions, churches, mosques, and so on, and several other touch points that we can look at to say, hey, this is something that you can do. But what I keep saying, and I hope you take away from this, is the fact that for that average individual, if it's not a benefit to them, short-term benefit to them, they may not pay attention. And so look at plastic recycling. That ecosystem is the fact that every time you drop a plastic, you get a few kobo, maybe one naira or something. I don't know what the rate is, but the fact that, oh, I can make some money from recycling my plastic makes me more interested in doing so. I believe that if all of that happens at the same time, it would go faster and much more at scale.
Okay, I like that particular submission there, because for most people at this level, it's all about what comes to you first. And the particular case of plastic recycling that you mentioned, I can relate very well, because people get paid when they, there is a school here in Lagos, Nigeria, where students pay for tuition with plastic bottles. You bring plastic bottles and they are converted into tuition for you. That kind of provides incentives for people to, bring more plastics and, get our sewage, drainages, clean. But on the very last note from me here, now, when you are pitching to investors and you have sustainability at heart as the owner of the pitch, what should you speak to that will, win the investors' heart and give you access to their purse?
Well, if you're speaking with sustainable investors, then talk about the things that you're doing in that regard. If you're speaking with impact investors, for example, then what you want to do is speak about the things that you're doing in that regard. If you're speaking with just the traditional investor who doesn't really care, I'm not sure I would recommend that you start speaking about your ESG goals and how you're going to be carbon neutral in many years to come and so on at the moment, particularly if you're speaking with local investors. What you can do, however, is make sure that your numbers would make sense, that you've within your system, within the project and the solution that you're doing, you've made sure that you've incorporated ESG goals across the entire ecosystem, across the entire stack, such that when the investor is analyzing your numbers, when they are analyzing your books and all, they may not really care about the ESG goals. So if you then say, oh, by the way, these numbers look this good, even though we are sustainable in nature, they may pay more attention.
Thank you very much for your time on Early Exchange, Bade Adesemowo. Yeah, the conversation has been very insightful. We must now move on to other things on our list today.
So we'll just go for a short break. Now, when we come back, we'll look at venture capital and its role in funding startups in Africa. I asked the last question there. I asked the gentleman there what to say to investors. Okay, now the investors we're talking about now, the venture capitalists themselves. Let's look at their role in funding startups. Every day in Africa, one business is starting up or the other. We'll come back from this short break. We'll look at that. What do you say to investors? What are the roles of these angel investors, if there are still any of them, in businesses? So.
Entrepreneurship is a critical element as a driver of economic growth and development, promoting innovation, job creation, and wealth distribution. Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, has the potential to becoming a mecca for entrepreneurship, but sadly, the country faces multi-dimensional challenges that have prevented the growth of its entrepreneurship ecosystem. One amongst the many challenges faced by young entrepreneurs in Nigeria is access to finance. According to a study by businessfinancing.co.uk, Nigeria startups lost 74.4% of venture capital funding in 2020, indicative of the country's low standing as a startup funding destination. One of the many alternative investment opportunities available to startups is the venture capital, which provides capital financing, technological expertise, and managerial experience to companies and entrepreneurs. Venture capital specialize in guiding new companies. Also, portfolio companies get access to the venture capital funds network of partners and experts, as well as assistance when they try to raise more money in the future. Venture capital is typically only available to institutional and accredited investors, but it is still relatively scarce in Nigeria. Despite the growth in venture capital, there are still challenges to accessing capital in Nigeria, including limited deal flow, inadequate regulatory framework, underdeveloped exit markets, competition for deals, amongst others. Nigeria's entrepreneurial ecosystem has significant potential for growth and development, and by addressing these challenges and embracing the opportunities, Nigeria could create an environment that promotes innovation, job creation, and sustainable economic growth. Juvi Ufiene, Soup News.
In 2022, Nigeria led Africa venture capital investment with $6.5 billion, according to Africa Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, AVCA. And venture capital is like a special kind of money that investors pump into a business or small and new business with big ideas. So they just pump this money into the business in return for owning a part of the business. They also don't just put in money, they also share with them ideas, to help them grow and succeed. And we want to examine how this is affecting the business ecosystem in Africa generally. So we'll also be speaking to the different stages of investment when it comes to venture capital in Nigeria.
Honestly speaking, that particular statistic you rolled out there, that Nigeria, African venture capitals, pumped in like $6.5 billion is cheering. Because one thing is this, when people talk about venture capital, they don't just pump their money into anything you throw at them. These are businessmen who want a stake in your business. For Africa to have attracted as much as that speaks to one thing. There is the brilliance of thinking domiciled in this country. We are a people that are thinking, and we're thinking about business and
great ideas.
Yes, great ideas. Because when you watch programs like the Dragon's Net, for instance, where you see young people come and pitch their ideas to possible investors, and they are giving them seed capital, you kind of marvel at the level of brilliance that these young people are, displaying. The foresight is deep, and the innovation they bring to the table just to have, people buy into their ideas is great. How do you see that, Sam?
Great. For venture capitals, most of the time they invest in big ideas and sustainable ideas that will bring about return on investment. So I think we have this kind of ecosystem that will sustain and support venture capitals in Africa and Nigeria indeed.
Now, let's talk about how venture capital actually really helps businesses. What are the things that it helps business to be able to do? We'll talk about seed funding. Venture capital firms provide the initial funding that startups use or need to get off the ground. And this money helps them to cover essential costs like product development, to cover for things like market research and hiring initial team members. Now, what business can survive without that at the initial stage?
Well, it all depends on the scale you want to operate in. The one-man business owner, the sole trader that is by your doorstep selling cola nuts may not need a venture capitalist to succeed. So, but if you're thinking of scaling your business, essentially, if you're thinking of growing beyond your immediate neighborhood, then you need these venture capitals. Then apart from that, now, when a venture capitalist, throws its money behind it, it's a form of validation to you. Before now, the likes of Flutterwaves and Paystack, to mention a few, were just, local champions, quote and unquote, until they got, attracted by bigger sponsors, bigger venture capitals, and which lent a kind of credence to them. So today, when you get a call from Flutterwave asking for partnership, you pay attention because, yes, if they could convince other people outside, those with big money, deep pockets, if they could convince them to buy into their ideas, it means their ideas is great. So, great. So that is just one area also, validation of your ideas. And I think apart from that, even mentorship and guidance, because when somebody with deep pockets and deep experience is coming to buy into your business, it guides investment also, because if he does not do that, money goes down the drain. So that mentorship and guidance, I think for me, is a key factor there.
It's critical. I think more is the business sustainability. What are the business plans? What are the return on investment? So once venture capitalists see that there is future in that business, they would like to invest in that business. Essentially, beyond the seed capital, they equally invest in human resource development to sustain the business, either through mentorship, through career development program, and personal growth development to sustain the business to a point where you can have return on those investments. So these three elements are critical to sustaining those business. But what is important is that your business plan must have a level of sustainability. There must be a return on investment at the appropriate time. Then there must be discipline and structure in terms of the business practices. And you must be ethical in terms of what you do with those businesses before they can provide those seed capitals as well.
So it's not as easy as it appears, but people just write, they put together 5 pages of proposal and they are sending across the world because one company has attracted, venture capital investment. And it's funny, really.
Now, another way venture capitals really help businesses is to build network. You cannot do business in isolation. The more people you know, the more people you can relate with, the better for your business. So venture capitalists have extensive networks and that startup can tap into. They don't just only help you with money. Some of those venture capitalists, they don't just help you with money. They don't just help you with mentorship. They help you with connections, that they have. And these connections to other investors, to industry experts, and potential customers, as well as business partners.
But I think apart from that, they help in risk sharing because, if it is true that 9 out of every 10 businesses will die in their first 5 years of existence, maybe because they are doing it solo. But when venture capitals come into play, of course, it is not a fail-safe mechanism, but then they share the risk with you. And when you see fellow risk sharer with you, you are more confident to move in the direction of your dream. So that is, for me, a very key one. Then apart from that, there is expertise that they bring to the table. If I am coming to you with my money, I'm bringing a measure of expertise because, you may just be a young man or a woman there that has ideas. And beyond ideas, there are ways things operate that my own experience will tell you. They do say that what young men can't see on the mountaintop, old ones see at the base of the mountain. And what the lady cannot see with his eyes open, the clergy does with his eyes closed. So this is the kind of expertise that venture capitalists bring onto the table. And
you mentioned something earlier, Ayo. You talked about risk sharing and how venture capitalists want to share the risk with you. But you know that the practice is anyone that wants to share the risk with you also wants to share the profit with you. And one of the major decisions that these startup owners or small business owners have to make is how much of my business should I give out to this venture capitalist. You mentioned a program where business owners come to pitch their ideas, but if you also, for people that know the business, you also need to determine on the spot how many % of your business you are willing to, give to that venture capitalist. But what advice do you have along that line, Sam?
No, I think what is important is that for venture capitalists to support businesses, number one, the risk assessment must be very thorough. Number two, the human resource, which is key, and then the expertise that you equally bring to bear in addition to the experiences that the venture capitalists bring to the table. So what is important and very, very critical for sustainability of businesses is that the risk must be assessed properly, return on the investment, because investors look at return on investment. How safe is those capital deployed into your businesses? So it's important that as business owner, we must take cognizance of the human capital, the capital that is being provided, mentoring. You talked about networking. This networking that the venture capitalists provide are more of operational network and strategic network. sometimes you may know some people, but you don't have access to them. So that strategic networking will help to grow your businesses from time to time.
Yeah, if I may answer your question directly, as in you were asking how much of ownership or how much of equity should you hand over to venture capitals at the point of pitching to them. From the episodes of some of these TV shows that I've watched so far, I think young people should manage their emotions and don't go there cap in hand. Yes, it is their money you need. If you go there, because there is no equality in the world of power. The strong do what they want, the weak suffer what they must. Let's not forget that you are going to the table of negotiation and you are dealing with people who are much more experienced than you. This is where speaking to experts before you go and pitch happens. At the point of pitching, many people are very emotional. They just want a buy-in. They just want a yes by all means. There is a particular kind of yes that will say no to your progress in life. Because if you care to interview those who have been sponsored, some companies that have been sponsored by these so-called venture capitals, the local owners are not really smiling, because at the end of the day, they seem to have been, gagged on all fronts by these so-called venture capitals. So you have to speak to professional, maybe business consultants to guide you. So before you say yes to all the terms, take a look at it and don't be too emotional about it.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Sorry, Ayo, I think there's a challenge here. Before you go into any business venture, there are laid down procedures, and those procedures are discussed before you go into. So in terms of equity, those are some of the first line discussion you must have. Even these are the offering, these are the percentage. So those are determined before people release those capital. So it's neither here nor there. So if you are not aligned to what your venture capitalist will provide for you, you may not necessarily go into that kind of arrangement. So what is key is that before you go into that kind of funding arrangement, this, like they say in law, he who comes to equity must come with a clean hand. So you are the one that is looking for capital. So those who are trying to provide that capital for you has a bigger stake in the business. But what is important? What are your stake? What are the future of that investment? To what extent can you grow your business when that opportunity comes? I think the long-term goal is more important rather than wanting to have everything at the beginning. But more often than not, it's always a win-win situation in those kind of arrangements.
So how do you measure your own personal contribution? How do you measure your own equity, for instance? Okay, I have a business idea, you are bringing money. You said that those who are coming in should have the larger stake. What if I disagree with you? Because after all, I'm the owner of the idea, I'm the custodian of my idea. How do you measure my own equity compared to yours? You have the fund, I have the idea. Without my idea, your fund can't work. Without your fund, I cannot scale. How do we strike a balance in the discussion?
How do you nurture your idea without capital? So you cannot bring that idea into fruition if you don't have capital. So that's the debate.
Oh my goodness.
All right, that's the discourse. What is important, like I mentioned earlier, is that one, you have a very big idea that you think is sustainable, but you don't have the funding for that idea. So the funder and that idea has a place to meet so that you can sustain that business. So what is important when you're discussing, you already have an equity. The percentage of equity that you have in that business will be debated, will be agreed upon. So therefore, you equally need to have a business consultant who in an advisory capacity will provide technical guidance for you to conclude on those discussions, for you to be able to sustain those businesses. But in any case, it's a win-win situation. No matter the percentage in terms of agreement, that business will be sustained into fruition. And as you grow in that business and the venture capitalist is withdrawing some of his funding, then your equity might increase over a period of time. There are some arrangements that are in place in those areas. Thank you.
If you ask me, I will say that's why it's very important that as a business owner or an idea owner, before you go to any venture capitalist, you need to know what your needs are. You know, you don't go empty-handed. You don't go to them with a business you are also not investing your money, in. I think you should first of all be the first venture capitalist in your business. You should have
idea is already an investment.
Yes,
an equity.
Apart from the idea, you should also be able to
source some funding.
Invest some level of fund into the business. So you know exactly how much you have, how much you need from them. You should know beforehand. Not like it's when you get there, that's when you just begin to process whatever amount of money, because that's what happens to a good number of people. When you go to meet somebody and you say, okay, please invest in this business, the person calls, an amount of money that you feel, maybe that probably something that you've never heard before, or that you've not planned around initially. You would lose your balance and you would not take the right decision. So know exactly how much you need. Know exactly how much it is worth for that business, what exactly you want to use that amount of money to do in the business. I think that will guide a lot when it comes to that.
I agree with you absolutely on that. Okay, so these discussions are very, very deep, and people could be very sentimental about them, because how do you measure equity in the first place? But one key thing I want to advise young people who are pitching ideas, there is one question, or there are two questions investors will have you answer. One is, what is the return on investment for my capital? And then what is probably your burn rate? You get to see people who don't even have an idea of what burn rate means. I mean, the rate of consumption of capital. And they can't, let alone answer ROI. If you cannot answer that ROI question in convincing terms, with figures, not with emotions. Somebody went to pitch somewhere and they asked him, okay, how would you be able to, how would you tell me how many units I can sell? He said, okay, I can. He couldn't even place a number on it, and it became a problem. Okay.
At this juncture, let us involve Ade Atto-Badele, the founder at Remarkable Ideas Limited. He now joins us via Zoom. Good morning, Ade Atto-Badele. Hello, good morning. Okay.
Who's there?
Good morning.
Hello.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very
much
for joining this venture capital conversation. So let's start with this. What are the different funding stages of venture capital, and what is their impact in the life of a startup or a small business?
Well, of course, there's you start off with a pre-seed. That's when you and a couple of other people have a good idea, and you go and tax your family, and you tax your friends, and you tax everybody that you know. I remember a man who, a very famous bank director in Nigeria, who said, "Why are you coming to me to ask for money? Have you exhausted your father's money? Have you exhausted your mother's money? Have you exhausted your own money? If everybody that believes in you has to have put money in it before I can." So there's also you start at pre-seed, and then when the idea starts to get a little bit of traction, you try and get more external investors, people who may not know you personally but might know the idea, or rather you can pitch the idea to, and they can say, "Oh yes, this sounds like a great idea." They're usually the angel investors that come in at the sort of seed level. And after that, there's you go through a series of Series A, B, C, D, and if you're very fortunate, you get to E. And of course, the objective is to get to an IPO, because venture capitalists are looking for a rate of return on their money. They also know that the majority of the investments that they make may not get to IPO level, so maybe it's 1 in 100 or 2 in 100 that actually do that. So not everybody gets to Series E. You might be getting to Series A and become cash and become a company that's maybe not going to an IPO, but maybe be merged with another company, or may just be getting relatively good cash flow.
Okay. Let's talk about the language you speak to venture capital. What makes an idea remarkable to venture capital? After all, you are the CEO of Remarkable Ideas. What can I say that will make my idea remarkable to a potential sponsor?
What can you make of that? An idea has to be a remarkable idea is an idea that people want to talk about. It's actually remarkable because people are remarking about it. So the question really is that what problem are you solving? What experience do you have in solving this problem? I can't come to you and say, I want to solve the problem of cancer if what I know is gardening. I won't have the requisite experience to do that. So as a venture capitalist, what you look for, people actually solving real problems that they understand and where there's a market for the problem that they're trying to solve.
Now, let's speak to due diligence. On the part of the venture capitalist, what are the due diligence activities that they need to perform to ensure that things go well?
Well, first of all, as I said, do you have an idea that's marketable? You get the people to create a minimum viable product, which doesn't need necessarily to be much more than a clickable screen, and put it out there and say, do people even believe in this idea? If I sent it out to 1,000 people, would 2 or 3 people say, oh, I want more information? You need to have a market out there. Secondly, tends to be that you need some sort of engineering capacity. And when I say engineering capacity, it's not very, if you're going to have to outsource everything that you're going to do to other parties, you're going to have a bit of a struggle. Most successful venture capitalists or incubators will tell you that you need some sort of engineering capacity as a team. So if one person is a superb marketer, another person might be the person that can design. It doesn't mean that you have to be a coder or whatever, but you must have some sort of design engineering capacity along with people that have ideas before this thing goes along. And
I'm speaking to the venture capitalists now.
Tend to not be the best people to invest in.
Yes, I'm speaking to the venture capitalists now. I mean, the people that want to invest. We have had situations when they've invested in what they perceived as great ideas only to discover that they have been duped and scammed. It's happened. Even some of the best investors in Nigeria have told sad tales of such. So what are the due diligence processes they must go through to ensure that even their own investment is safe?
When you say duped and scammed, can you define that? What does duped and scam mean? Does that mean that I didn't have an idea? Or does that mean that I just put a piece of paper in front of you and you signed? Well, caveat emptor. You wouldn't buy a car without kicking the tires. You wouldn't buy a car without starting the engine. So of course you do due diligence on the individuals, their background, and things like that. But no idea is foolproof. You could have a great idea today, and the regulations come out from the government tomorrow that completely ruin the idea and make it not viable anymore. So the VCs, when you say people are scammed, I don't think that's really the word that we would use. Some people do not get the return they expected, but I don't think many people have been scammed.
Okay. All right, thank you for clarifying that. On a very last note, can you just tell us maybe 1 or 2 changes that have taken place on the venture capital landscape with a view to giving us what we can learn as potential pitchers of ideas? What has changed on the venture capital landscape that we can learn to?
You're breaking up. Can you say that again, please?
I said, okay, maybe in 1 or 2 lines, just tell us what changes have taken place on the venture capital landscape that those who are pitching ideas can learn from.
Well, first of all, pre-COVID, there was a lot of money that was awash, and venture capitalists had budgets to meet, and a lot of money was coming into Africa. But post-COVID, the tightening of the economic situation across the world has meant that that money isn't flowing as easily as it used to be. So you're now up against a lot more people and a lot more due diligence than you were before. And I think a lot of people don't understand that this is the new regime. you've got to have a better than a good idea these days, because people are awash with fintechs, people are awash with health, people are awash with agriculture. Where are the unique? You've got to have a pretty unique idea, like I said, a remarkable idea, something that people want to talk about, that isn't the same and not just a clone of what else you see out there. Everybody can create a bank. Everybody can create a POS agent network. That's not something that is going to bring a real rate of return for a venture capitalist at this point today.
Thank you very much for your time on Early Exchange, Mr. Ade Atobatele. Our time is now fast spent.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, thank you very much. And he said something very spot on. The AVCA report states that financials, information technology, and consumer discretionary sectors are the main, sectors that venture capitalists are focusing on in Africa. So it would do any small business or entrepreneur a very big good to really look into those areas. And that's how we wrap up the conversations today on Early Exchange. Ayojimi, have you had a very good time?
Well, I've had a very good time as always. It's been a 3-hour ride, and we want to say thank you to all our guests who, join us via Zoom to talk about issues. And to you viewers out there, thank you, because without you being there, we cannot be here. Tomorrow again, we'll do it together. My name is Ayojimi. I'll see you tomorrow.
I am Olaoluwa Awe. Have a nice day.